Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show. Iowa's just days away. New Hampshire's right around the corner. What's everyone's biggest problem headed into next week? A notable dropout on the GOP side. Does that matter? And a listener question I think the pundits, the GOP, everyone is ignoring at their own peril. Alex, where should we get started?
Let's talk problems, Joe. Well, so by the time people...
well, there's lots of them.
Let's talk the problems you just mentioned. Yeah. By the time people hear this, most of the candidates will have already made their final pitches in Iowa. We did get one email. There was someone who was driving in Iowa to a caucus event who was actually listening to one of our previous shows. So maybe they're on their way to hear one of the pitches. But you've said before, Joe, there's only going to be 2 or 3 tickets out on the GOP side. I wanted to ask you, and we were talking about this morning before we recorded, what's going on under the hood and what problems are candidates having right now?
Well, the whole question is everybody keeps talking about how, that Nikki Haley doesn't have much of an organization compared to the kind of organization that DeSantis and Trump have. And, so thinking through that, one of the problems DeSantis has, despite the fact that he has this really strong, let's say he does have a stronger organization than Nikki Haley. The problem he has is that means that his organization, they've been making phone calls, they've knocked on doors, they've got a list of everybody who supports Ron DeSantis in the state of Iowa, and he needs to turn every single one of them out. What I suspect has happened, though, is people have left DeSantis over the months as he weakened. And so there's a lot of people on his list that are no longer for him. They could be for Trump. They may be for Nikki Haley, particularly those who've decided they don't want Trump. And, if you see these focus groups and interviews that networks are having with people who somehow are trying to decide between Nikki and DeSantis, even though they're much different candidates. The problem he's got is I'm sure he knows, his campaign team knows they've lost support, but they're going to have to call every single DeSantis supporter and pull out all, including getting out the vote of former DeSantis supporters who are now maybe supporting Nikki Haley and actually help catapult her by him. I mean, that's my theory on how she takes second.
Is that because they don't know exactly which ones they've lost and they just don't have the time and the infrastructure to figure that out?
Yeah, that's generally what happens. In the Dean campaign in 2004, we knew that in the last 2 weeks, like a third of our supporters had left. We had lost tremendous ground. We had a big enough list of supporters, quote supporters, that if they all turned out, we would win. Okay, so you have let's say you have 80,000 people. If you turn out all 80,000 and they're still with you, you win. The problem is, that when you called, what we used to do, I'm assuming they've done this, is we would just randomly pick 1,000 people on that list and call them 4 or 5 days out. And sometimes we would call 1,000 of them randomly each night for the last 10 days, just to check on how our we call them ones. Ones are strong supporters you've identified and are going to the caucus. Twos are people who are with you or leaning, but they're with you and haven't confirmed that they're going to the caucus, or leaning and are going to the caucus. I mean, there's some move there. But anyway, what happens is you take a random sampling of your ones, call them out, and you find out that 700 of them are still ones, but 300 of them are somewhere else. I mean, they've moved to Trump, or they've moved, in our case, they had moved to Gephardt or Edwards or Kerry. My point being, now you've got a problem. Do you turn out, if you don't know who of now, you said, you've got that whole list of 80,000. You don't have time to call them all back, and you don't really know which chunk of them are gone. You randomly sampled it. And so you're only at this point of the game. I'm talking about now. There's things you could have done 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. You could have tried to call the whole list back. But the only thing you can do now, if you're on DeSantis, is pull out every single one of his supporters, the people they think, even though they know they've lost a lot of them, and so what happens is you unwittingly help somebody go by you because you're only pulling out 60, 70% of your support, and you're actually turning out 20, 30 points of someone else. I suspect not many of those people are going to Trump. I think in the end, if you had already decided you were with Ron DeSantis, or if you had decided you're with one of these other candidates, particularly in an early state like Iowa, where you've seen everybody and, Trump hasn't been around and you have some concerns about him, which is why you were looking to turn the page with Ron DeSantis. I think many of those people will either stay home or come out for someone other than Trump if they're not going to come out for DeSantis. And I think so that's one really typical problem. That same problem exists big time for Donald Trump in New Hampshire. I think go back, but like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, he was in the 50s.
Yeah, mid 50s.
50%. Yeah, mid 50s in New Hampshire. So if they've identified back then and kept identifying and kept building, now they're at 30, 39, I think, in the last 37% in the last poll. Assuming that's accurate, he's lost a third of his support in New Hampshire. Where did those people all go? Well, it certainly appears if you look at the polling, it appears they all went to Nikki Haley. Inexplicably, I admit, but if he's gone from 57 to 37, and she's gone from what back then probably was 12 to 32. So when he pulls out when that stronger organization, this is the interesting thing about you have a stronger organization than Nikki Haley. How does she beat both these? How does she beat DeSantis in Iowa? How does she beat Trump in New Hampshire? And it turns out their, quote, stronger organizations may actually be the people that get out enough of her vote that she didn't even know that those voters exist, right? She may have her own list, but it's a smaller thing. She's obviously not organized as well as they are. It's a real interesting conundrum. I've been on both sides of that with Mondale. We knew exactly who our supporters were. We pulled out every single one of them. We had a 32-point victory in Iowa. It stayed. We were right on top of it the whole way. The Dean campaign, as I said, we knew our support was faltering, but we had no
you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Late. Yeah, that late when you realize late that you've lost that kind of support, you got to turn them out. And that means it's just it is the scariest place to be right now. I think DeSantis's campaign manager in Iowa or Trump's campaign manager in New Hampshire, with the way Nikki Haley's been coming on, you've got a great organization. That's, by the way, everybody's saying, oh, DeSantis will still stay in second because of his stronger organization than hers. Everybody, I think, thinks, again, Trump he does have a much stronger organization than Nikki Haley in New Hampshire and in Iowa. But I suspect that those two campaign managers in those two different states are about to have, minor. They're having like big doubts right now.
Yeah, I would say big doubts, minor health problems, major health problems. I mean, Joe, you've done it. You've done it at every level, both being the guy who knocks on the door and pulls them out and says, get in the car, go vote, to organizing the strategy. I've been the guy knocking on the door, pulling him in the car. And what I think is a universal truth in Iowa is it's so much about these relationships. But when you get really close and people are starting to flop, they will smile, they will nod, they will get in the car. Some will tell you they're not voting for your guy anymore. Some won't.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that really, that respect you and respect your process, all that. And they get in the car and then they smile and pull the lever for the other guy. And you think, oh, no, I just pulled out a vote for the other guy.
Yeah, well, the difference too in the Democratic side of caucuses, I mean, we are not having them anymore, but in the Democratic Iowa caucuses, you actually had to stand in the room in a corner with your neighbors. You would literally, I remember in the Iowa campaign in which I was working for Kennedy, and Jimmy Hogan was the chair of the county, Democratic chair of the county, and the caucus was in his house. And he was for Carter, and I had convinced his daughter to be for Kennedy. So we got to the house, and everybody got in the Carter people got in one corner of the living room, and the Kennedy people got in the other corner of the living room. And his daughter starts walking from the Carter side to the Kennedy side, and Jimmy Hogan screamed out, young lady, you take one more step and you'll be grounded for a week. And she did like this ballerina pirouette in the middle of under the chandelier in the living room, under the light in the living room, and spun around and walked right back into the Carter corner. Well, the interesting thing about the Republican caucus is it's a secret ballot. So I don't think if you're that Trump driver taking a Trump voter to the caucus, I think they're going to smile and say, yeah, MAGA,
right,
with Trump. And they may stand in the Trump corner, but when they actually cast, or the DeSantis corner, this is my point, they can like just write DeSantis down on the paper, or the DeSantis people got you there. They took you there through the snow and the cold. And you've been trying to decide between DeSantis and Nikki Haley, and you just saw DeSantis be at 5% in New Hampshire, and Nikki Haley's only 7 points behind Trump in New Hampshire, and you're thinking, I'm gonna write down Haley. So yeah, I just think that there's things like that happen, particularly on the Republican side because of the secret ballot. But again, just having the best organization doesn't matter if you don't have the better candidate, or if the candidate is gaffed. And that's the other interesting thing about Nikki, because I have no idea how with some of these statements about, that she's had about New Hampshire will correct Iowa and some of the other minor gaffes that she had in the Dean campaign, those gaffes helped erode us the last 10 days. But frankly, the ones about the Iowa caucus system were the least of our problems at that point. It was but we were unloading votes so fast that there was no way we could make up for it. She's the one that's gaining right now. So it's the opposite. DeSantis would be more in our situation, and maybe Trump could be as well.
Well, and it's a unique thing about the voters in the first couple of states in terms of momentum and looking ahead. In a lot of especially in Iowa, voters, and more on the Democratic side, I think, they do like to be the ones picking the winner, I think, or don't want to be that one person holding out for the very last. I mean, the last Christie voter in Iowa, even though he's dropped out, which we'll get to in a minute. So there is that sense of, you're looking ahead. You don't want to be holding the fort down for the one person when they're done coming out of Iowa or coming out of New Hampshire. So, by the way, Joe, new Suffolk poll just came out. It still has Trump at 54 in Iowa. Haley's now at 20, if we believe that. DeSantis is at 13. The only reason I bring up that poll is that is a massive, massive shift. That kind of before it was like 12-11 if you're Haley and DeSantis, but there are going to be organizers pulling out a lot of the wrong votes, regardless of how real that poll is.
No, but that's the kind of shift I'm talking about. If that's true, DeSantis has lost like a third of his support. He was like at 18, I think, or 20, hovering around there in the Iowa poll and other polls. So he's lost a third of her support. His support. She's moved up, and now when he pulls out those voters, yeah, they either went to Trump or Haley, I think.
Yep.
Right.
Well, 87% of the voters in this poll are for one of those three. Right. So you're not seeing six guys in the teens anymore.
Yeah. Look, I've said this before, say it again. If your name isn't Trump, Haley, or DeSantis, you can be guaranteed your support is going to zero. It's just going to evaporate to zero within a day or two of Iowa's results. People in New Hampshire and other states will be sitting there saying, well, Christie's out, but hey, I'll wait till then before I decide I'm bailing on them. But I mean, I'll wait to see what happens, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But once they see you don't go anywhere, you're gone. I have always taken a different tack in terms of thinking about this stuff. My experience is that early state voters, one, yes, like to see all the candidates. They want to see them, repeatedly, and make a sound judgment. They take it very seriously. Primary or caucus voters in both parties take the process very seriously in Iowa and New Hampshire. And so they're going to kick the tires a lot. But I think it deep down, it sort of breaks into two groups. A group that has decided that they're going with the front runner, the guy whose turn it is. And that, that's Trump in this case, obviously, for sure on the Republican side. Or they have problems with the front runner, the person that everybody's been telling them for a year that's going to be their nominee. And those people who have those problems, who are sitting in these, the 20% that were with Haley, the 13 in this poll that are with DeSantis. I don't know where Christie was in this poll, but again, assuming he's in single digits somewhere, that's going to be like 40% of the electorate has problems with Donald Trump. They're actually somewhere else. And so when that all breaks down, people go, well, no, you'll never see all of DeSantis vote later on will break for Trump. It's not really how it happens. Anybody who's for DeSantis in New Hampshire right now has made a conscious decision that the guy that everybody's been telling him, no one can beat Donald Trump. He's a done deal. All these people are wasting their time. Except they're with DeSantis after being told all that for the latter part of a year. It's not clear to me at all that they aren't on the side, at least right now, of, hey, I'd rather give somebody not Trump a shot. Kind of almost like what Christie said in his announcement, right? I'm not for any of these people, but he got out in time to give somebody a shot. So we'll see.
So I want to get to Chris Christie in a minute. I did want to just ask, did you know there was a debate last night? I mean, we work in this, and I had to check Twitter and then go on and watch a little bit. I did not have that on my calendar.
Yeah, no, I did. And I watched it. I should fess up. I watched maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes of it.
That's about a half hour to 45 minutes more than I watched.
Well, so there's two things though. Does it matter? It probably does. First of all, you can't get into the heads of Iowa voters who watch that. I'm talking about Republican caucus voters who watch that debate and are trying to decide between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. I mean, who won that debate or any of that stuff? I mean, it's just, you can't, as observers, it's really tough. I know some of the focus groups, CNN had a focus group that was kind of nothing changed. Well, something is changing.
Right. That poll,
that's all I'm saying.
Shows it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and all of it seems to have stemmed from Nikki Haley's debate performances. So I think, and it's not quite clear either to me that Trump everybody said, well, the big beneficiary one more time was Trump. Well, I don't know. He wasn't there. The more people are focused right now, the last 10 days, last week, last 5 days on DeSantis or Haley, I think the better it is for Nikki Haley. Why? Because these people just got one more dose today from that poll that DeSantis isn't really in it. So I think there's going to be even more movement in the next 5 days, is what I'm saying. And, it starts to just, man, it really moves fast when you start losing air in the balloon. And I know, like I said, I was there with I think 15, 16 days out, we were in first place in Iowa with Dean. Literally 15 days later, we're in third place.
Right.
And, and the opposite, when I was with Dick Gephardt, we were in dead last 3 weeks out. I mean, dead last at 7%. And we came charging back and won the state, defeated Caucus and Paul Simon. Simon and Dukakis has been fighting the whole time in the lead. We were in dead last. There were plenty of people between us and those guys, and we went by everybody. But when it moves that fast, and Dukakis had probably the second strongest organization in the history of Democratic Party in the state, didn't matter. He was pulling out our votes. So that's what I'm saying. When everybody's all hyped up about DeSantis's better organization over Haley, those poll numbers would give me a lot of pause as to just how good that organization is going to help him as he's driving those smiling faces to the caucus, and then they secret ballot for Haley and it's also going to be harder for him to get him to go, I think, given where he is now.
So I do have to ask, Christie, we knew he was going to do pretty terribly in Iowa. Him dropping out overall, I want you to zoom out past Iowa. Does that help or hurt Trump?
Well, it definitely helps Haley right now. I mean, all the indications were in all the New Hampshire polls that I saw where they asked second choice. Something like 80% of Christie voters supported Nikki as their second choice. None, I think like 2%, 3% said Trump. Not hard to recognize that as reality. I mean, he'd been out there pounding away on Trump. Yeah, he can hit, pushed on Nikki on the way out for, not joining him and being out there. But in the end, I think his voters in New Hampshire are people who really have a strong problem with Trump, want somebody else, and I think are going to vote. And so I think that one push alone, even if she took third in Iowa, could be enough of an opening for her to still get by Trump. I mean, this is if she takes third in Iowa, still being able to give Trump a fight for first in New Hampshire and defeating him. If she goes by DeSantis in Iowa, though, plus Christie doing this, getting out, so his supporters are free to move, and with Governor Chris Sununu's support, who I one time called John on this podcast inexplicably.
Well, I do want to just point out, by the way, that he got up and last night after the debate said he'd still support Trump even if he were a convicted felon, if he were the nominee.
Yeah. So, we're not talking profiling in courage on the anti-Trump front. I'm talking about reality, though, and how the momentum of a second place finish with Christie's voters now freed in New Hampshire and with Governor Sununu supporting Haley, I would be if she comes in second in Iowa, I will be the surprise for me would be Trump winning New Hampshire. No, she'll defeat Trump in New Hampshire. I thought this for, as you know, 6 months and repeated myself endlessly on this podcast about why I think all this is going to happen. Look, if Trump wins Iowa and she takes third and then he goes on to win New Hampshire, this thing's, it's over in the, the first one out the door. They'll just, who knows who will beat who out the door first. I just don't think that's likely to happen. I've never seen Iowa not surprised. No one's ever gone through there without some surprise, including the biggest front runner on the planet, Fritz Mondale in '84. The surprise wasn't him. No one cared. 32-point win. Who cared? It was who took second. And I think that's exactly the surprise that's going to happen in Iowa this time. And then you go to New Hampshire, where she's already pounding on Trump's door. And with coming in second, New Hampshire's not going to correct Iowa.
Right.
It's going to amplify it. I mean, I just don't, so, hey, maybe she gaffed herself out of second place in Iowa. I just don't know. But I think Iowa's likely to surprise. And I've always thought both states were signaling that Trump's weaker than people thought. We'll see.
So, Joe, I do want to go to Trump for just a minute. He also had a town hall last night, which we can get into the whole, did anybody actually watch that another day? But what the hell is he doing? He is basically just dropping so many more Oppo clips for the Biden team to run basically every day, right? It's getting pretty out of control.
Yeah, but look, his voters don't care. We know that. I mean, this guy, so yeah, our hair goes on fire because, he's caught or not caught. He says that, he's hoping that there's an economic crash in the next 12 months because it would help him. He's rooting for an economic crash, not like just downturn or anything, but just something that wipes out a ton of the people that he is supposedly fighting for. But they're probably all, damn straight, and by the way, if you shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, that's a good reason to do it. So I don't think, I think it has that impact. And I just don't, I don't, to try to create some rhyme or reason that, he expands beyond his base in the general, it's just really tough to see. But it's just more of the same stuff. I mean, there's nothing new here really, but the Biden, look, in the end, I still believe, and I think we're starting to see it with this stuff, is that in the end, the polls will come into play. You'll start seeing improvement on the economic stuff because that's happening. It takes a long time, but it'll be there. And then the contrast that, to Trump's credit, his team has done a really good job of kind of keeping him out beyond a clear, direct everyday contrast with Biden or anybody else. Part of that's the primary, his fights with the other people. He gets to fight with Nikki and those people, and and people don't focus on Trump, Biden. I think, as we've said before, that is going to increase now as he gets more and more in the public eye politically in his primary fight and in taking on Biden, and Biden engaging him on the extremism, the democracy and the mega cult stuff. It's that contrast. And so this just adds to it, but I don't think it's, again, I've always thought he'll help us. He'll say crazy stuff. His base will love it. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, even what's going on now in the House, with whether they just, the MAGA, crazies, stop the procedural vote for MAGA Mike Johnson. I mean, he put it on the floor. They voted against it. So, their inability to govern, they don't want to govern.
Joe. Yeah, he might be gone
that's
soon.
What I'm saying. Will he even be here 2 months from now? So, this isn't about what's best for America. Trump, the MAGA GOP, they have no desire to govern. And like you said, we're just seeing this with with what they're doing in the House right now, which I think is going to also just exacerbate that contrast and make it clear. You've got these GOP congressmen, many of them have said they would do nothing that remotely help Joe Biden between now and the election. This is in response to like, hey,
let's not shut down the government.
Yeah, and let's not shut down the government. Let's cooperate on immigration reform. No, I'm not going to cooperate on immigration. That would help Biden. I'm not going to help Biden.
Right. And Mitch McConnell, by the way, is whipping votes for the border deal. Like that's where we're at. That's how. So they're fighting that too. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So I don't think there's any. This is just more of the same. Let's all root for Trump and MAGA rooting for an economic crash. By the way, kind of weird, right? If the economy is like so bad and horrible, then like there's no need for a crash, right? I mean, there's no need to root for one. It's admission that the economy is doing really well. It's actually, I think, an admission that somebody started to tell Trump what I've been saying, that, hey, it takes a while, but people are going to start getting that the Biden economic plan is actually working, and it's going to take shape between now and Election Day. So get ready for that, because that's what's going to happen. So what's Trump do when somebody told him that? A pollster or somebody talked him through how that happens that way and why it happens that way? Of course. Hey, I really hope there's a total collapse of the American economy between now and election day, because that would really help me beat Biden. Well, yeah. Why would he have to root for that if it was such terrible. A disaster already? It's all bullshit. It's
Joe,
like
you're making too much sense. You are making too much sense.
Sorry. No.
I think that's a very good place for us to end. That's right. We will get, by the way, we had a really good couple of listener questions this week. One from Brian, one from Joyce. We promise we'll get to those next week. We're pretty excited about them, but that's about all the time we've got today.
Okay, well, thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone, for listening to That Trippi Show. This podcast will always be free with support from our advertisers and is part of Resolute Square, so check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to That Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. And you can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question in the reviews on iTunes. See you next week, and we'll keep our eye on Iowa, and I'm sure we'll be talking about what happens and what it all means. Thanks a lot for listening. See you next week. Take care.
Resolute Square.